Please remember that today's hearing will be available through the stenographic reporting as well as through broadcasting on the Chamber of Deputies Web TV. Please keep in mind that remote participation is allowed to all colleagues according to the rules of procedures. As part of the fact-finding investigation on Italy's commitment in the international community for the promotion and safeguarding of human rights against discrimination, today we are here for a hearing of representatives of Emek Shaveh as well as Mosaic Centre. On behalf of the members of the committee, I would like to greet and thank you for your availability. Thank you for being here with us, connected online. Specifically, I would like to thank Ms. Talia Ezrai, the Director for International Advocacy in Emek Shaveh, as well as Mr. Najati Fitiani, the President of the Mosaic Centre Association. Please keep in mind that Emek Shaveh is an Israeli NGO working for the cultural heritage, to defend the heritage and to safeguard the archaeological sites as public assets belonging to the members of all communities, regardless of their ethnic or religious background. But there is even more. According to the organization, the cultural heritage is a fundamental resource to be able to create bridges, to strengthen ties and bonds among different cultures and people. In fact, in this regard, Emek Shaveh is regularly in touch with the communities living near sensitive archaeological sites in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and in Israel. They do so by always monitoring the possible infringement of property rights. Mosaic Centre is a non-profit organization. It is supported by Pro Terra Sancta, and it is committed in the promotion and safeguarding of the Palestinian cultural heritage, especially when it comes to the enhancement and conservation of mosaics. In fact, I must say that I was able to see firsthand the work that they carry on. I was able to see the work done by Pro Terra Sancta during an institutional visitation that we carried out. I really appreciate everything that is done. There's also a lot of cooperation among their universities and our Sapienza University here in Rome. Thanks to this cooperation with the local and international institutions, throughout time it has become possible to ensure that the local communities, tourists, and pilgrimage could pass through and understand what is happening in the Holy Land. We must also say that, as we have seen during a recent mission, Israel is currently carrying out policies that tend to enhance the cultural heritage from a Jewish background that goes against the very complex history of that part of the world that is a crossroads of many people and civilizations. A very emblematic case is the neighborhood of Silwan in East Jerusalem, or the town of Sebastia in Old Samaria, about 10 kilometers from Nablus. At the same time, there is an attempt to try to broaden the competence, the availability, and the ability of the Israeli authorities to be able to also have access to Area B in the West Bank. This could risk leading to a cultural dispossession of the Palestinian population. Lastly, I would like to mention that during a recent meeting of the UN Security Council, which was held on 25 February, the Office of the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Sigrid Kaag, underlined that it is still possible to reach the goal of a safe and protected Israel that can coexist with a state of Palestine that is both independent and fundamental. Moreover, the coordinator urged the member of the Council to make sure that Gaza remains an integral part of a future state of Palestine and that the enclave in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are unified from a political, economic, and administrative point of view. Now, with this being said, and without further ado, it is now my honor to give the floor to Ms. Talia Ezrai, the representative of Emek Shaveh, so that she can share with us her presentation. Please, the floor is yours.
Non riusciamo a sentire.
I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. Probably you need to turn your microphone on. We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Your microphone is off.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Okay, sorry
Okay,
about
go
that.
ahead.
Okay, good morning. And I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to discuss this important and urgent subject this morning. And I also want to thank you for the introduction, which saves me having to introduce Emek Shaveh. I just wanted to, so the topic of my talk today would be exploiting ancient sites in the West Bank to advance annexation. And I just wanted to add our perspective at Emek Shaveh that we strongly believe that due to the pivotal role played by cultural heritage in shaping and preserving the collective identity and resilience of communities, cultural heritage development and preservation should be conducted in partnership with the communities in which sites are located. And this is a principle that has guided all our work since our inception. I would, could we start the slideshow, please? Thank you. Could we move to page number 2, slide 2? The next one. Yeah. So before I address the situation in the West Bank, I want to clarify distinctions in governance so that it will be clear later when I address steps advanced by the current Israeli government. So in sovereign Israel, as you see on the slide, and annexed East Jerusalem, the government body responsible for overseeing antiquities and archaeological sites is the Israel Antiquities Authority. In the West Bank, in Area C, which is under the auspices of the Israeli Civil Administration, this role is taken by the Staff Officer for Archaeology. And the relevant law governing antiquity sites in the West Bank is the 1966 Jordanian Law of Antiquities. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry for Tourism and Antiquities oversees sites in areas A and B of the West Bank through the Department of Antiquities and Cultural Heritage, as outlined by the Oslo Accords. I must mention that Israel holds security responsibility over areas C, B, and C, and this has a significance as we will see soon. Please move to the next slide. Yeah, so Israel is a signatory to several key international agreements. The 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict and its first protocol, but it is not signed to the second protocol. The 1972 UNESCO World Heritage Convention, the 1966 International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and here I'd like to mention in particular the right to participate in the cultural life of a community, and 1966 International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Could we move to the next slide, please? Since 1967, ancient sites in East Jerusalem and the West Bank have been instrumental in land appropriation, with archaeology serving as a pretext for territorial control. This process has been intertwined with a process of shaping a historic narrative that prioritizes a Jewish past, reinforcing Israeli claims to the West Bank, or, as it is called, Judea and Samaria, which is often referred to as the cradle of the Jewish nation. During the 1980s and 1990s, key sites in East Jerusalem and the West Bank were developed as tourist attractions aimed at reinforcing a perception that the settlers are the indigenous people who have returned to the land after 2,000 years. This very powerful narrative is complemented by the portrayal of Palestinians as lacking historical roots, and fuels opposition to the prospect of withdrawing from these areas in order to facilitate the establishment of a Palestinian state. This process was given extra impetus by the Oslo Accord when settler organizations made a strategic decision to utilize archaeology and the historic narrative to develop sites deep in Palestinian territory as a means to influence the public opinion against the prospect of conceding territory to a Palestinian state. Could we move to the next slide, please? So what you see here in the slide are examples of already established sites in the occupied Palestinian territories. Perhaps the best known is the one that the Honorable Chairperson mentioned, the City of David, a large and important ancient site in the neighborhood of Silwan in East Jerusalem. The management of this park has been outsourced by the government authority to a settler organization called the Al Foundation that combines residential settlement, that means taking over Palestinian homes by various means in a dense Palestinian neighborhood, with development of archaeological sites for tourism. There are also examples here of Tel Shiloh or Khirbet Sailun and Susia in South Hebron. If we could move on to the next slide, please. In the last 6 years, the process of taking over land under the pretext of protecting archaeology and developing sites for the public benefit has significantly intensified both in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank, where multiple additional sites are being taken over by settlers with full government support. In parallel, settler councils in the West Bank, NGOs, and representatives of the settlers in the Knesset have been leading a campaign accusing the Palestinian Authority of deliberately destroying Jewish antiquities. Following on the heels of this campaign, the government has allocated millions of shekels for surveillance and measures to obstruct Palestinian development on their own lands near ancient sites. Could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. It is important to keep in mind that there are 6,000 archaeological sites in the West Bank, which means that almost every Palestinian village is situated in or near an archaeological site. In recent years, Palestinians have faced a steep increase in stop work orders and demolitions carried out in the name of archaeology. And I call your attention to the picture in the bottom right of the slide, and data which over 2 years shows that there was a 162% increase in demolition orders issued under the pretext of archaeological related demolition orders. In addition, settlements are taking over multiple small sites such as springs, ancient pools, and shrines, placing them off limits to Palestinians, while recent government-funded plans target much larger sites, and I will address that in a moment. Could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. The strategic importance of archaeology as a tool for furthering the ultranationalist vision for a greater Israel is particularly evident in the coalition agreements of the current government between Mr. Netanyahu's ruling Likud party and his coalition partners from the ultra-right Jewish Power and Religious Zionism parties. In accordance with the coalition agreement, government authorities in the field of heritage were consolidated under the newly formed Ministry of Heritage, and Amichai Eliyahu from the Jewish Power Party was appointed Minister of Heritage. In the West Bank, the Israeli civil administration, which includes the staff officer for archaeology, has come under a new body called the Settlements Administration, which is within the Ministry of Defense and is under the authority of Minister Bezalel Smotrich Minister Bezalel Smotrich from Religious Zionism. And I'll mention that both parties have annexation at the top of their agenda. Could we move to the next slide, please? Not surprisingly, within a few months, the largest ever allocation of funds for the protection and development of archaeological sites in the West Bank was declared, first with a government decision to allocate 32 million shekels for the development of Sebastia as an Israeli tourist attraction. And I'll talk about the plan shortly. The second is a decision from July 2023, where the government approved another 120 million shekels for a program to, quote, salvage, preserve, develop, and prevent antiquity theft at heritage sites in Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley. In actual fact, only 10% of that budget was allocated to measures against antiquity theft. The rest is dedicated to developing the West Bank sites into tourist attractions and for developing educational activities around them. And I'd like to quote former Minister Eliyahu's statement when the government announced the program, quote, heritage on both sides of the Green Line will receive full protection, he says, and continues. The pinnacle is the protection of heritage assets of generations of the land of Israel and the eternal people. Could we move to the next slide, please? In 2024, measures to bring ancient sites under full Israeli control have reached a new level with two initiatives that represent a transition, in our opinion, from processes we have described up until now as de facto annexation to de jure in the realm of antiquities. The first was a cabinet decision in June 2024 to expand the authority of the staff officer for archaeology to antiquity sites in Area B. This is despite the Oslo Accords granting the Palestinian Authority jurisdiction over antiquity sites in Area B. The implication is withdrawing planning authority from the PA in areas defined as antiquity sites in Area B. And last July, the Ministerial Committee for Legislation approved the advancement of a legislative amendment to extend Israeli antiquities laws into the West Bank. If this is passed, the bill, which is now advancing through the Knesset Committee, would replace the Civil Administration Staff Officer for Archaeology with the Israeli Antiquities Authority, effectively replacing a military authority in the West Bank with a civilian one and applying Israeli law to antiquity sites in the West Bank. This bill faces strong opposition from the Israeli archaeological community, who have warned of potential international repercussions for the academic community. Could we skip the next slide? So move past the next slide to the slide that addresses Sebastia. So we can, yes, thank you. This brings me to Sebastia. Sebastia is a multi-layered archaeological mound which spans millennia and is situated in the northern West Bank near Nablus. Excavations since the early 20th century have revealed a continuum of diverse cultures and peoples. Traditions and stories from the Old and New Testament are associated with the site. In 2012, Sebastia was added by the State of Palestine to UNESCO's tentative list of World Heritage Sites for what it considers to be the outstanding universal value of the site and is pending consideration for its inscription as a World Heritage Site. For Israel, and particularly the settlers, the site is important due to the remains from the Iron Age and its identification as with the ancient city or northern Israelite city of Shomron or Samaria and King Omrides. As a heritage landscape, Sebastia is one continuous site which includes an acropolis and a town. The town grew from a centuries-old village which formed around the historic ruins and structures. After 1967, the Acropolis area was declared a national park. The Oslo II agreements in 1995 split the site into Area C, the Acropolis, which is left on the map. So if you look in the map on the slide, the left side, on the left of the red line, is the Acropolis. And while the rest of the site and the Palestinian town are in Area B to the right of the map, which is under the Palestinian Authority's Department of Antiquities and Cultural Heritage within the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The Historic Center of Sebastia has undergone a series of conservation projects, which Mr. Najani Fitani will no doubt talk about. Particularly over the last 5 years, Jewish settlers, with support from the Israeli government, have attempted to impose a separation between the Acropolis and the town of Sebastia. This has taken the form of frequent visits by settler leaders, members of Knesset, and ministers to the site. It should be noted that the only route to the Acropolis is through the town, which is in Area B again, and these sites entail massive military escort. Tensions between the residents and the military tend to concentrate around the plaza and the Palestinian flag, which was erected in the plaza, which is in Area B, and therefore under Palestinian civilian control. But it is adjacent to the Acropolis, which is Area C. In 2023, the Israeli government approved a massive development plan, which I mentioned earlier, aimed at turning the site into an anchor site, or a site that would attract particularly Israeli visitors. The plan is designed to complete the separation of the Acropolis from the village, or from the town, and divert tourism away. And it also threatens the outstanding universal values attributed to the site by the State of Palestine and international experts in the field of heritage. And I just want to call your attention to the picture in the bottom right picture, which is it's a little bit small, but a visit by the Israeli Minister of Environmental Affairs, Idit Silman, and the head of the Shomron Regional Council, one of the settler councils, Yossi Dagan, after this allocation that was announced. Moreover, last July, the military issued an order to seize 1.3 dunams of land at the summit of the archaeological site, which is, you can see on the map, it is within the red frame to the left. The seizure order signed by the Central Command targets a plot at the highest point of the ancient mound. Together with the municipality of Sebastia and the landowners, we have submitted an objection citing the 1954 Hague Convention, which prohibits establishing military facilities in historic and cultural sites. In parallel, there's also been an increase in military incursions through the town, raids on homes, and recently a boy was killed apparently by a sniper. Could we move to the final slide, please? In conclusion, recent legislative initiatives, cabinet decisions, and settlement expansions reveal a strategic use of archaeology to entrench Israeli control over the West Bank, undermining Palestinian heritage and land rights. A process which has transformed cultural heritage into a tool for oppression and means to facilitate both de facto and de jure annexation. The site of Sebastia is currently facing a serious threat of development, which will consolidate full Israeli control over the Acropolis while severing the site in two, a move that would disconnect the Palestinian residents of Sebastia from their ancient heritage, deprive them of an important component of their identity and livelihood, and undermine the outstanding universal value for which the site has been considered for inscription on the list of World Heritage Sites. We kindly urge for your intervention to protect the site for the people of Sebastia, for peace in the region, and for humanity as a whole. Thank you.
Sì, molte grazie, dottoressa.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What you told us will definitely give us some food for thought, and maybe we'll have some question later on. But in the meantime, I would like to give the floor to our other speaker, Najati Fitiani, the representative of Mosaic Centre. The floor is yours.
Non la
Sorry, we cannot hear you. You need to turn your microphone on.
Buongiorno.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to be here today. Thank you for allowing us to bring our testimony of what we are experiencing nowadays in Palestine. My name is Najati Fitiani. I work in the Mosaic Centre, and this is a Palestinian association, non-profit association that deals with the safeguarding and protection of the archaeological heritage in Palestine. Picking up on what my colleague just said, I would like to spend a few words talking about Sebastia. Mosaic Centre has a long experience when it comes to the conservation, preservation, and restoration of many different sites. We have worked very often with our friends and colleagues from the Pro Terra Sancta Association. And thanks to this collaboration, it has been possible for us to renovate many old buildings. We have been able to enhance and give value to old sites, historical sites, and this made it possible for us to create craftsmanship labs. We have also been able to open shelter homes, welcoming homes, and the goal has always been that to try to be able to promote a sustainable economic development for the local community. In fact, we know that the community there keeps alive thanks to tourism, thanks to the incredible added value of the archaeological site. As my colleague was saying, this is found on the Acropolis, but you must always remember and keep in mind that the Acropolis also actually includes other important areas, not only the Acropolis. For example, we have John Baptist, his grave. This is an important pilgrimage destination for Muslims and Christians. So this is found in Area B, which means the area that is militarily controlled from the Israeli, but is still under the conservation of the Palestinian Authority. According to the new law, now there is control of the Israeli Authority also when it comes to these sites. So not only does this bring along many risks, like my colleague was saying, we were mentioning that the Acropolis could become completely detached from all the rest. We know that very often there is an instrumentalization of archaeology, and the goal is always that to try to create new forms of expropriation, try to create different military areas or different settlements. So there is always the risk of completely isolating the Acropolis from Sebastia. As of right now, it is possible to access by actually walking through the town. So we really do not know what the situation will be like in the future. Maybe it could be completely isolated, attached to the settler colony of the nearby town. And this would mean completely taking it away from its territory. Differently, as for the land, that is where the authority tries to deal with the restoration and the conservation, which is then entrusted to the Israeli. Very often these sites are not considered very important for them from a historical or religious point of view, and this could lead to wanting to conserve them even less. The Palestinians will not be able to step in, to intervene, because they will be prohibited, and therefore this will result in their abandonment and complete decay. This is a project that actually applies to many Palestinian villages, many Palestinian sites. But there are some places that the Palestinians mainly focus on. For example, there is an effort to try to really be able to focus on the archaeology found in Area C. We can already see what has been done with the latest Israeli government, and specifically there are these new laws that are being approved. Today, our staff, our friends working in Sebastia can really bring us testimony of the fact that the situation is in complete decay. There are never-ending issues, never-ending problems. There are issues one day after the other. Very often, the soldiers come in, the settlers. There are attacks on the residents, and for about 2-3 hours a day, everyone is forced to lock themselves in the house to completely shut down all the activity because they are attacked from the police. Unfortunately, this is the reality, and just a month ago, a 12-year-old boy was killed. So, unfortunately, this is the reality day after day. There are never-ending attacks. We know that citizens are very terrified. There are some tear gases that are being used, and therefore everyone is very terrified by what is happening. Many lands are being confiscated to create access roads or to create archaeological areas or for military actions. Anyway, for one reason or another, they are losing this important land, a land that is fundamental for the Palestinian. Sebastian not only is a land where there are many trees that are grown, trees that give fruits, and now after a year and a half of a war with no tourism, no jobs because of the war, this is really a source of income for the citizens in Sebastia. It is very important for their nourishment, and for this reason I think you can understand the importance of this town. This town has always based its importance on the historical value that it has always brought along. As my colleague was saying before me, this is a place that really is full of history. The population is full of history, and it is really a place that belongs to humanity. Unfortunately, there are these new laws, there are these new sources of financing, and this gives control to the settlers. So for this reason, it has been less and less possible for us to really enjoy this area, this site, as an archaeological site available to all. With this being said, I really want to thank you for your attention. Thank you for giving me the time to give my presentation. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fitiani, for your presentation. And thank you for really emphasizing the seriousness of the situation right now. Thank you for mentioning how serious the situation is for the Palestinian Authority. Now, before asking questions, I would like to ask my colleagues if anyone would like to take the floor. Colleague, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really want to thank both of our speakers for your presentation. You really shared lots of information, and everything you said was very interesting. What you shared is interesting also because of Italy's role when it comes to the conservation of the cultural heritage. What I mean in this regard is that, for example, Italy in Iraq, but also in other countries, for example, Syria or Libya or Tunisia, is carrying on cooperation projects to be able to support the conservation of the cultural heritage. So, considering that Mr. Fitiani spoke Italian, I would also like to actually better understand the interaction that already exists between your projects and our political and diplomatic authorities here. I think that this could really be of interest for the work that is being carried out by the committee. Again, I believe that maybe this could be an area in which we can provide some guidance, also thanks to the recognized role that our country carries on these topics. So thank you very much. Yes, well, what you presented is most definitely a very serious situation that requires us to understand that it is an emergency. There are these new laws that have to do with the way in which financing is allocated. There is the expansion of settlers, and all of this helps us understand that there is a true strategic use of archaeology. This is done for the purpose of the occupation. So archaeology is used as a means of oppression. It is used as a political weapon. So I think that it is very serious to understand that in Sebastia, the army, the settlers, can just arrive to share and spread fear among people living there. So I immediately think of a question after listening to you and considering the situation. Actually, I want to say something before I ask my question. In January, I traveled with the other members of the Human Rights Committee. We went to Israel and Palestine. And when we were in Silvan, we saw exactly what you presented to us this morning, especially what Ms. Israel was sharing with us this morning. We were able to really see firsthand how houses are destroyed. And we saw that very often this is done to set up some tourist attractions, to open some green areas. But we're talking about a densely populated neighborhood where you walk around and you see that some houses have been completely destroyed. There are some centers financed by the European Union at times. So you walk around, you see that there are many ruins because in the end the project is to set up a park in one of the oldest neighborhoods in East Jerusalem. And then you take a look at the houses with the Israeli flags, and those houses have not been destroyed. So it's not very clear which plan is actually in place. So what is the urban plan being applied? I think that we can say that this is mainly a political plan more than an urban plan. So I would like to ask both of our speakers, faced with such a dramatic plan, faced with a strategy that really goes against the UN resolutions in area A, B, and C, because if we try to broaden these skills to area B, then we know that we are violating the Oslo Accords. So I am wondering, my question to you is the international and the academic community reacting? What is UNESCO doing? Have they taken a stand on all this situation? Or is all of this taking place in the complete silence of the international community? How is the European Union reacting to this situation? I would like to better understand a bit more. I'm asking this question because following our recent visit in this part of the world, it seemed very clear to us that there is a lack of stance. No one is taking a stand. The international community is not taking a stand. So I'm wondering if you could tell us if this is actually the case, or if actually the academic community and UNESCO have already started doing something, if they have already shared their concern and condemnation. So thank you very much, and now the floor is back to you.
Would you like to start?
Yes, please. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Should I start? Okay. So I think I'll answer the second question more. In terms of, I mean, there are many aspects to the question. In terms of UNESCO's role, the UNESCO basically addresses the sites which are declared World Heritage Sites. So the area of City of David and Silwan that you're talking about is not strictly part of the old city of Jerusalem and its walls, World Heritage Site. It's outside, which if it had been included as a buffer zone officially as part of the World Heritage Site, UNESCO could have made some comments on the situation there, but because it is the old city and its walls doesn't have a buffer zone, therefore the City of David and Silwan are kind of outside the remit of UNESCO. UNESCO does take a position when it comes to the World Heritage Sites. For example, in Batir, which I didn't, I had a slide about Batir, but I didn't include it because for lack of time. And in the last decisions by the committee, the very significant threat to the World Heritage Site of Batir have been addressed. But again, this is a statement made by UNESCO in terms of, you know, how far it resonates, I don't know. In terms of the European Union, there is certainly an increased interest in what is happening at heritage sites across the West Bank, and the instrumentalization of archaeology as a means for advancing now what we've been talking about annexation de facto for a long time, and now we're really talking with the introduction of the cabinet decision in violation of the Oslo Accords and the legislation that is now being promoted and advancing through the Knesset committees. We're really talking about annexation de jure. And the issues that my colleague has so well detailed regarding how this is impacting a place like Sebastia, for example. These have real implications for what is happening on the ground. We think that there is a kind of registering or an acknowledgement of the urgent situations regarding antiquity sites, ancient sites, and their instrumentalization within the European Union. Of course, we would always be happier if this was raised on a more regular basis and at higher levels. Thank you.
Sì, grazie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I am also wondering if Mr. Fitiani would like to add something, but I do also have one more question. Just 3 days ago, I received an email from an Israeli NGO called Breaking the Silence. And this NGO was denouncing the fact that there are some laws being discussed at the Knesset, and if these laws were to be approved, then they could limit or actually prohibit the civil society in Israel, for example, those dealing with human rights, and they would not be able to keep working because it would become impossible for them to get funding from foreign companies. They would be taxed up to 80%, and for this reason it would be impossible for them to act. Moreover, there is another limitation that comes from a law that really limits access to Israel to all those people who asked the militaries and the soldiers to respond because of their crimes. So once again, this would limit the access of volunteers for reasons that are linked to freedom of expression. Of course, this really downsizes the possibility to actually have a freedom of thought, really downsizes the democratic area in Israel that is already really compromised. So my question to you is if these limitations would also have an impact on the NGOs working in the cultural field. If these laws were to be approved, what impact would they have on your work? Thank you.
Yes, I'll be sure to give my colleague an opportunity to respond. Yes, they would. I mean, basically, the way the...
Sì. Allora, riguardo la prima domanda, la mia collega penso...
Sorry, Mr. Fitiani, I apologize that your colleague started answering the question, so let's finish listening to her answer, and then we will give the floor back to you, and you can ask all your questions and comments. Thank you.
I'll just say that, yes, it does apply to us. I mean, we are in the cultural field, and it applies to all organizations who receive most of their funding from foreign governments. So actually the law targets organizations who receive most of their funds from foreign governments, but excludes organizations that receive some funding from the state, which basically leaves the human rights, the civil society, but limiting it to human rights and organizations, which we are part of the human rights community.
Grazie.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And now we can give the floor to Mr. Fitiani, please. Okay, well, as for the question, I think my colleague already answered. I can simply say that in the end, of course, there are some concerns, there are some condemnations, but this right-wing government cannot really be stopped by anyone, so there's not much we can do. As for the NGO that you were mentioning, I don't know much, but I must say that with the excuse of the war, there are now some limitations that are applied to all those people working in different fields, so with different associations, working with us, working with people that come from abroad, but there are no more visas anymore. There are many restrictions. And it is very hard to participate in many projects. There are some people who cannot come back because they don't have a visa anymore. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, thank you. Let me ask my colleagues who are connected online if anyone would like to ask any questions. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't seem like there are any more questions from our colleagues online. So I think that if there are no more questions, we can conclude this hearing. I would like to once again thank our speakers. Actually, I would like to say one more thing before we wrap up. Based on everything that you shared with us today, we will try to see if it is possible to also involve the Italian government. Just like our colleague Quartapelle was saying, Italy has always been in the front line. Italy has always dealt with the protection of archaeological sites, especially sites that have to do with the cultural heritage. So I believe we can ask the Italian government to try to understand what they plan on doing to be able to protect these sites and to make sure that there is no further attempt of expropriation. We need to make sure that this heritage is not taken away, is not removed from Palestinian management. So our question to the Italian government will be if it is possible to pressure the Israeli government to loosen these limitations. We will try to do this. We will try to ask. Of course, we don't know if this will really have an impact, but we will do this on our part. Once again, thank you very much. The hearing is now over. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.